When it comes to the Israel-Hamas war, information has been hard to verify out of Gaza. A lead cause of that, the loss of journalists on the ground. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, at least 15 journalists have been killed since the war began on October 7th. It could sadly just be the start. And it's where journalism finds itself right now, at a crossroads between newsroom cuts and bubbling violence at home and abroad, following years of political rhetoric that's ultimately endangering them. And it's on that state of journalism that I spoke with former Washington Post executive editor Marty Baron as he released a new book, Collision of Power, examining his time at the Post, the purchase of the paper by Jeff Bezos, and the role Donald Trump played.
So you write about this really unprecedented moment in time where you have the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, who buys one of the most prolific newspapers, the Washington Post, just as President Donald Trump takes office. Do you feel that this collision of power, as you describe it, was inevitable?
Probably so, because the Washington Post had a history of holding power to account going back to Watergate, and since then, and even before then. That is the history and heritage of the Washington Post. That's its identity. Investigative reporting is core to that newspaper, and he knew that when he bought it. He read Katharine Graham's book about her time at the Post, her as owner of the Washington Post. She had clashes with the Nixon administration, of course, during Watergate, and so I think he anticipated that at some point he might have similar clashes.
And as you detail and witness firsthand in many of the cases, the way that Trump really tried to bully the paper, what do you think would have happened had someone purchased the Post who didn't have the deep pockets of a Jeff Bezos?
Yeah, well, the deep pockets were important in terms of investing in our future and launching initiatives. He also, before he invested, he actually changed the strategy of the Post to be more national and global and not regional. But also, it went beyond the deep pockets. It went beyond to the point that he resisted the kind of pressure. Trump was actually trying to sabotage his primary business, which of course was Amazon.
I'm wondering why there are such varying depictions, really. You talk about some of the Post staffers saying that Bezos is a corporate villain, and yet you write that everything I've heard and seen tells me that Bezos honestly believes in an essential role for journalism in a democracy. For all the speculation that Bezos would use the Post to exercise influence, I never saw any evidence he had or would.
Yeah, that's right. Well, when he acquired the Post in October of 2013, people were nervous about that. Look, I mean, he's a wealthy guy. He's the founder of Amazon. There are plenty of legitimate questions about Amazon's business practices, its practices with regard to its workers, its intrusions into people's individual privacy. There are a whole bunch of legitimate public policy issues with regard to Amazon. It has business with the U.S. government. It provides cloud computing services, including to intelligence agencies. So I think people had a lot of worries, and particularly with regard to his treatment of workers. So there were concerns that about his ownership of the Post and what that would mean for us, whether there would be huge conflicts of interest, whether he would try to exercise influence. But the reality is that I never saw that. He never did that.
You talk about post-George Floyd and the criticism that you came under, in particular from some of the black staffers at the Post. Of that, you write, I had not been the good listener I regularly urge others to be. Black journalists at the Post were telling me we had not done nearly enough, that their voices weren't being heard at senior levels. Of course, there's been a lot of discussions about diversity and inclusion since then. Do you feel that enough has changed, that we have enough diverse voices in the highest tiers of management at the nation's newspapers?
Well, we need more. I mean, there's no question that we need more. And that's something I think news organizations have to continue to work on. I do think post-George Floyd, people have worked in a very determined way to improve the situation. But overall, we actually, in the industry, in the field of journalism, we need a bigger pipeline. We need more people from communities of color actually getting into the field of journalism in the first place and being reporters and going from being reporters to being editors and going from being editors to being senior managers and the top executives. And we have to work on that as well. So I think there's a lot more work to be done. But I think that certainly post-George Floyd, people have focused on that a lot more than they did before. And as you say, black journalists were insisting on action now, they didn't want to wait any longer.
Of course, Trump's administration was mired in scandal and controversy and perhaps many could say that crescendos on January 6th. And of that day, you wrote, "This is what Trump had wrought. The press was now required to physically protect itself from fellow Americans informed by the President of the United States. Trump's unrelenting rhetoric condemning the press as the enemy had made this moment inevitable." It's been 2.5 years since. Do you think that things have gotten any better for the press since then?
No, I don't think they have gotten better for the press. Look, Trump himself continues to attack the press. He continues to describe the press as the enemy of the people. He has argued most recently that NBC should be prosecuted for treason. I mean, these are incendiary remarks. People in the press have told Trump over many years that his remarks are going to lead to violence. They did lead to violence on January 6th. Certainly the worst violence was directed at the Capitol and potentially at members of Congress, but there was a lot of violence directed at the press as well, and that could very well get worse.
You've been at the forefront of so many of the major headlines, even before your time at the Washington Post, obviously. Was there a particular favorite story or a certain charge that you remember getting, just, you know, that you felt like this is career defining?
Well, my most gratifying story was actually at the Boston Globe when we launched an investigation of abuse, sexual abuse within the Catholic Church, and really, more important than the extent of the abuse, the actual cover-up by the church of that abuse. We published that story in January of 2002. It had an enormous impact on the church. It's had an enormous impact on how institutions deal with allegations of sexual abuse, institutions other than the church. It's had an enduring impact. The impact continues to this day, more than 20 years later. And the reason that means so much to me is because it affected the lives of ordinary people and the lives of people whose voices simply had not been heard.
Our thanks to Marty Baron for sitting down with us.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.